Good evening all, and welcome. Exploring abandoned places can certainly be fun, but can lead you to all kinds of danger. It's time to get comfortable and let the darkness take control. One afternoon, a buddy of mine and I decided to visit a massive abandoned mental hospital in order to take some photos. We're talking 11 wards of 2 floors and a basement, all connected from ward to ward. In total, it must have been 200 to 300 linear yards of winding connecting hallways on each floor. You get in and see open cell after open cell after cell, peeling paint and graffiti all over the walls. We check the basement, walk through the majority of the wards, and are now at Ward 8. We got there early in the afternoon, after maybe 2 or 3, because we were too pansies to go at midnight. Mind you, we've heard that there's a cult that gathers, and people have been known to stumble across the occasional hobo on their visit. So we came equipped with a couple of cushaws, praying not to get into a knife fight. But shit, it's better to have one than not, right? So, Ward 8. We're in a connecting hallway with a couple of wired-off windows that can see outside, and my buddy says, Yo, get away from the window. We look outside, and there's an ambulance. No lights on, just slowly creeping around the hospital. He must have been going about 5 miles an hour, so we thought, damn it, if there's an ambulance, there must be cops somewhere. Bad logic, I know, but we were just worried about being busting for trespassing. The ambulance disappears from our line of sight, and must have driven all around the wards at the same pace, because a minute or so later we see the ambulance pass right along the hallway that we were standing in. So creepy. Thank God, the ambulance drives away. So we think, okay, shit, that was scary. There's no cops around, let's just keep going. We slowly advance for another 2 or 3 minutes, and come across some huge lobby. So we think, okay, shit, that was just a scare. There's no cops around, let's just keep going. We slowly advance for another 3 or so minutes, and come across a huge lobby, probably the cafeteria, and start taking a couple of shots of the collapsed ceiling. We walk a bit further into the cafeteria, and are by the windows again. We see the ambulance once more, creeping just like the last time, along the perimeter of the building. We hide from the window, hoping that we weren't seen, as the cafeteria is full of windows to the exterior. This time, we start to shit ourselves a bit more. He disappears from our line of view again, and of course comes across the other side of the building, circling it just like last time. This time, however, he doesn't go to leave the complex. He drives up towards 11, the last ward, and parks in a cove with no exit that was right out of our line of sight. We hear the doors open and close, and another door open and close. We were able to tell that there was only one person in the ambulance from the first time we sighted it. What the hell is going on? Was this guy here to shoot up? Seemed like a bad place for a trip. Was he here for some sort of drug deal? Or was he back here to play with us because he saw us on his last ride around? We stay put, and at this point we're about 50 yards from Ward 11, and 100 to 200 yards from the exit that we came in from. We know of no other exits, except for the ones at each end. Trying to be as quiet as possible, we begin to hear footsteps on the floor above us. Seconds later, the footsteps turn into running. Towards us. Nope. We both instantly go for our knives and begin to boot out of there. The fastest 200-yard dash I have ever done to this day. We reach the exit, and we're safe, and we continue to book it a ways out of the hospital until we're on a path that gets us back to our cars. On the way back to the little lot with my buddy's car, we can see there's a truck. One of those Ford Wrangler types parked right next to my buddy's car. We get maybe 50 feet away from it when he turns on the car and starts driving down the road towards us. In the car is another middle-aged man, looking really sketchy. He drives past, and that's the last we saw of both of them. I never got a shot of the ambulance, as I was too scared to go near the window, and that my flash would go off. But I did get a shot of the Wrangler in the parking lot. What the hell were these guys doing there? An ambulance? I'd love to hear what you guys come up with. It's been playing on our heads for quite a while. In my town, there used to be an abandoned prison. It has since been knocked down. It was in the middle of the woods, and it wasn't the kind of place that you just ended up at accidentally. Every once in a while, police would patrol around it, but for the most part, they just let the barbed wire fences do their job. Now, this wasn't a high-security prison for serial killers or anything, but it held robbers and rapists and the like, up until about 8 years prior to the incident. It was unsettling during the daytime, especially as so much of it had been left behind, as if the place was abandoned in a hurry. But it was downright creepy at night. Well, I'm in high school. My friend Nick and I loved exploring, and we went all over, including to the abandoned mental hospital that was only a few miles from the jail. Growing up in the area, we knew that there was a small hole under the fence in one area, which was the only way to access the jail. One night, we made the normal trip under this hole, and were walking around the area outside of the jail. We were moving as quietly as possible, because we were aware that police would still occasionally patrol the area. They just parked their cars at the opposite side of the fence from where we entered, so we wouldn't be able to see them if they were there. Eventually, we were pretty sure that there were no police, so we began to be a little louder and turned on our flashlights. I should now mention that other than the occasional policeman who parks his car outside of the fence, we had never seen another person anywhere near the jail, let alone inside the fenced area. We were hesitant to enter the jail itself. First of all, because of how scary it is at night, and secondly, because it's a pain in the arse to get into the jail itself during the daytime, let alone at night. So instead, we kind of just walked around the outside for a while as we normally did, scaring ourselves for the fun of it. Anyway, eventually, we start working up the courage to go inside. So we make the long trip to the other side of it, where we knew the entrance was. We're walking along the side of the jail where the cells are, which had these huge windows. These were so that from the outside, when the jail was in use, you could see all of the inmates and what they were doing. As we were walking, out of nowhere, a light turns on from inside one of the cells that we were only a few feet from. We can't really remember seeing anything inside, just one of the beams of light, which first points upwards, and then directly onto us. At first, we freeze in terror. As I said before, we'd never seen anyone in there. Who would be sitting inside of a cell, totally silent in the darkness, as a couple of teenage boys walked around outside? We couldn't imagine that it was a fellow thrill-seeker like us. It was not the kind of place you'd want to sit alone in the dark. A homeless person? No. We didn't think he'd have a flashlight. And anyway, We assumed that cops must look through the inside during the day every once in a while. A police officer? No. There was no reason for them to be sitting inside of the building in the dark, waiting, like they'd known we'd been there for a long time. After a few seconds, we sprinted away as fast as we could. I didn't even turn around to see if we were being followed. We just found the hole under the fence and got out of there. We still wonder to this day who was sitting inside of an abandoned jail cell in the dark, presumably watching two teenage boys outside, then waiting until they were only feet away to announce their presence by illuminating the flashlight. I'd assume we'd never know the answer to that question, and I don't really want to know. We never went back at night, and the place is now gone. I live in Sydney, and in a suburb about 45 minutes away from the city proper is the haunted location that delinquent youths and myself simply call the Mafia House. It is a massive mansion, the kind that you just don't see in Australia. Maybe in movies like Scarface or The Godfather, but not at the bottom of the world. The security wall out of the front is full of bullet holes where a shootout must have occurred, and there's a massive metal gate that tries and fails to keep stupid kids out. Anyway, it's a rite of initiation to go there and explore, so off we went. We climbed the fence, walked up the foreboding driveway with trees on both sides like rich people have, and we see this giant foreboding house. We walk up the stairs, and there are these massive doors with no handle or anything, so there was no way of getting in through there. We walk around the back, and there was this beautiful pool, but it was empty and hella deep. It actually went under the house a little as well. We look inside, and it's frickin' hard to see. But there's all this furniture covered in layers of plastic, like old people have, and inches deep in dust. We search around looking for an entryway, but it's locked up tight. Thankfully though, or unfortunately, we find a small opening trapdoor that goes under the house. We thought we could go under, and maybe find an entryway, and so we had a look. Straight up, it was blacker than darkness should be, and the three of us that had the balls to get close instantly get overwhelmed by a bad feeling. After a minute of trying to work the courage to go in, when all of a sudden, a face, seemingly made of wind, rushed towards us, went through us, and we heard a god-awful moan. We scrambled and ran a dozen meters away and decided to get out of there. We tried to call our friends in the car that were coming. They picked up the phone and it was just endless static. That was one creepy experience I'll never forget. The thing is though, I think something may have followed me home. Ever since then, I've always felt uncomfortable being home alone. And I get the usual haunting sort of symptoms a haunted house does. Doors open and shut by themselves, lights flicking on and off, and sometimes I wake up and see something standing next to the bed, and I start screaming. However, that being said, I'm learning to deal with it. As long as it stays this way, I think I'll be alright. There used to be an abandoned psychiatric hospital in Kalamazoo, Michigan, that my friends and I would explore on weekend nights in 2003. It was 4 floors plus a basement, which included a morgue, and we explored every nook and cranny of that place. Judging by the most recent magazines on the 4th floor waiting room, it seemed to have closed in the 1990s. The previous institution just up and left everything Chernobyl style. Furniture, equipment, drugs, patient files, Even found some suicide reports. By 2003, the place was broken into and trashed by vandals, while the building itself decayed. It looked worse than the hospital in the Silent Hill games. That's not even the creepiest, most mysterious part. I once entered a room and saw a mirror that wasn't broken. Everything in this entire building was destroyed, except for this one pristine mirror still mounted on a wall. I've never seen anything more out of place, and I still get chills just thinking about it. I have a few stories. I was in an abandoned factory that had an underground complex. It used to be used for storage and went under the rest of the block, including the old workers' houses, which were now just people's homes. To get down there, you had to put a grappling hook through some pipes and lower yourself down on a harness. After that, we had to shimmy along some beams while still on the harness and over an open sewer. We got all the way down, and after each of us made it, we walked around and went under the house and found that they were being held up by very old wooden beams, several of which had fallen and others had rot. There was another incident in an abandoned maintenance tunnel in Philly. We found a room that someone had made in the dirt through some broken cement. It was full of women's underwear and child's bathing suits, most likely stolen from the nearby pools lost and found. In another abandoned house, we had someone living in it who was very mad, and they were very high, and basically told him that we were leaving, and he kept advancing, and then threatened to kill us with a hook. In another abandoned house, we found a pile of dead animals. Someone was finding roadkill, scraping them up off the ground, and bringing them to this abandoned basement to let them collectively rot. We didn't understand why, but we didn't want to meet the sicko that was doing this. In another abandoned house of an old murderer who was arrested, there was a bloody teddy bear, and we left an anonymous tip on that one and found out later in the newspapers that it was just animal blood. There was another random house. This was in an upscale neighborhood with a bank-owned manor. I actually had permission to be there. The bank had put out a thing looking for junk removal services, and I won the contract saying I would do it for free, that I had a hauling truck, and references showing that I'd done it before. I walked through and one of the doors was locked, and I called and asked if they had a key. They said no, and so I asked them what, and they said I could break the frame as it was going to be replaced. I found out how hard kicking a door down was when it's metal with a metal frame. I managed to get in with a crowbar, and the whole room had a circular mattress on the floor, rope, ball gag, lube, condoms, and I laughed until I remembered I had to remove it all. The final and most creepiest encounter I've had while urban exploring is when I was going into an old teacher's house. The teacher had passed away, obviously must not have had any relatives, and as I was going through some of his pictures, I realized that he had printed out an awful lot of them, specifically the female ones. He'd even gone to all the effort of go to websites like MySpace and Facebook, print them out, and just keep them. I don't know for sure if he was just being really weird or perverted, but it gave me an eerie feeling, seeing as he taught my class back in the day. I came upon a house a good 20 minutes outside of my tiny town while looking for fishing spots once. It was a large 2-story, 4-bedroom farmhouse, and it looked like The owners had just gotten up and left one day. All of their belongings were still there. Some dishes still in the sink, a skillet still on the stove, and in the closet I found tons of State Fair ribbons dating back to 1912. Among other things you'd probably want to keep. The beds were unmade, like someone had just thrown back the covers and gotten up. A bunch of church programs from the church I actually attended when I was a kid, and the name of a pastor I assumed was well before my time. There was an old typewriter on the desk with paper in it, and the word "the" typed out. Birdcage with a long dead bird in it. Photographs still hanging on the wall, and the door to the basement was locked. Then I still sometimes wonder what was down there, and why it was locked. Everything was covered in a very thick layer of dust though. You could see that animals had gotten in, and left footprints and droppings everywhere, especially raccoon prints. It was just insanely eerie being in there, like it was clearly abandoned, and had been for quite some time. But I still felt like I was intruding on someone's home. I mean, I explored tons of places, but this place felt different. It was in Iowa. I haven't researched the history of the house, or know who the prior owners were. I ponder the worst, but one of my theories is that they were probably an old couple who lived there. There was a walker in the closet, and one of those bathtub rail things in the bathroom, and they were probably put into a nursing home or something. Maybe their kids didn't care about the house. The dead bird, as always, was pretty sad to see. I am curious of going down into the basement. Maybe I'll return, but I'm almost afraid of what I might find there, because the thought crossed my mind too. Maybe I'll try next week. Who knows? Or maybe someone didn't want the person who was living there to be alive anymore. Took them down to the basement, locked the door, and never looked back. My friends and I used to be really big into exploration and photography. We have lots of interesting stories. The first, there was an abandoned meat packing plant in our hometown that we would often frequent when we were first getting into urban exploration. The place had some stellar graffiti and the like, and had multiple levels, and was architecturally interesting. Lots of red brick. A couple of years after we had last gone exploring there, I was dating a girl that was very into urban exploring. She finally convinced me one night to take her, so we went to my old haunt, the meatpacking plant. Turns out the owner had seen fit to cover all the windows with aluminium shutters, plunging the inside of the place into darkness. My exploring group and I had never really liked using flashlights since they stand out too much, so we all typically used low output battery powered coloured glow tubes to see instead. This did not make out for a fun exploration of the place, and we ended up deciding to leave after only 30 minutes. On our way out, I was rounding a corner, and the weak blue light of my glow tube illuminated a pair of feet sticking out from around a corner. We all froze in fear, waiting for him to get up, as we weren't being that quiet. But he didn't. We then decided to find a different way to leave, only to be yelled at by the feet guy's friend as soon as we got outside. On another occasion, my main exploring buddy and I would occasionally explore active sites, aka infiltration, such as factories and the like. Of course, it's very stupid. And one night we decided to hit the local old-timey tobacco plant, a very visually interesting place that we had been scouting for a while. The place was surrounded by a barbed wire, topped brick wall, but a neighbouring business had placed a small corrugated steel moving container adjacent to the wall in a dark corner. We climbed on top, got our radios, and decided to split up. My partner would stay on the shipping container and notify me of any movement, and I would drop inside, find an exit, and let him in. I dropped inside the wall, darted down inside, found an exit, and let him in. I dropped down inside the wall, darted into a nearby corridor, and found my way to a nearby shipping dock with a back door. I ran back to the edge of the corridor near my partner and was about to explain which door to come to when someone yelled, "Hey!" Some security guard inside had apparently seen us via a camera and was waiting outside yelling at my partner. Thankfully, he didn't know where I was, so I waited for him to go back inside before sprinting down the corridor and through the shipping dock exit. I met up with my partner, and we sprinted to his car and then hauled ass a few blocks away to his high school. There we sat on the roof and listened to the sirens going to where we had just been. We got extremely lucky, considering the stupidity of what we had done. Also, while on the high school roof that night, I met the girl from the last story. In the later years of our exploration, my partner and I hooked up with some out-of-state explorers and started hitting some larger scale sites. Our favourite was a nuclear power plant abandoned in the 80s. We would meet up with them and sneak in on a Friday night, as it was surrounded by busy construction sites and industrial parks, hiking for 2 miles to the site itself. We would set up camp in a room on the second floor and try to sleep through the cacophony of groans, shrieks, and clangs of rusty metal interacting with the wind, animals, and runoff water. We would then have the run of the place until Saturday or Sunday night. There was a remnant of a side building on the property, detached from the main complex, that contained a staircase descending 2 or 3 levels. When taken all the way to the bottom, it would dump you to a long, wide corridor, flooded with knee-height icy water, and with periodic open holes on the floor that were much deeper. This tunnel ran under the entire complex, dumping you out in the condenser room within the heart of the plant. It was a terrifying wade through utter darkness and cold that led to a verdant, beautiful area being steadily retaken by nature. Not one of the scariest moments I've had exploring, but definitely one of the most cathartic. Adjacent to this abandoned power plant was a complete cooling tower outer shell, standing at 660 feet. The inside had absolutely absurd acoustics, allowing you to stand in the middle, whisper, and then hear your own voice echoed back to you 6 to 10 times. We decided to climb this tower on the first trip, even though I lacked any safety equipment of any kind. The middle 3 of the 5 ladder sections making up the access ladder on the tower are completely open, with only a center rail for mounting a safety harness attachment. I climbed all the way to the top of the tower, stopping only for the girl ahead of me to have periodic nervous breakdowns. To date, it was the most terrifying thing I've ever done. I certainly did not understand height until I was 400 feet in the air on an open ladder that leans back as it follows the curve of the hyperbolic shape of the tower, with the wind trying to rip me off. When we reached the top, after enjoying the views for a while, we noticed that the entire top surface was ringed with lightning rods ground into the ladder, and a thunderstorm was starting to form. We then decided to start the 45-minute trip down the ladder, and we noticed a private security car had pulled up at the bottom. We laid down on the top surface of the tower, accepting that we might never make it down. Thankfully, he left soon, and we were able to make the trip down without any shocking incidents. My husband used to be a security guard, and he mostly watched gravel pits and construction sites. One of his gigs was fire watch in a decommissioned hospital/long-term care facility while the banks were sorting things out. I made a few nightly visits to him there. It wasn't an especially old building, maybe built in the 80s and used up until the mid-90s, and there were still some auxiliary power generators running somewhere, and the elevators would suddenly go up and down all the floors for no reason, 2 times a night, but never on a set time schedule. He and I were the only people there, but the freaking elevator doors would open and close, and the elevator would make its nightly trip. Some of the rooms had flower arrangements, all dried up, empty IV bags hanging from stands next to rumpled beds, the belongings of dead people, things they'd forgotten to take, and stuff still in lockers. There was no morgue, but there was a room that was equipped like a morgue, and no one had cleaned it. So there were still sheets on a gurney, and various medical exam tools in trays and drawers. We went around one night trying to turn on all the hall and room lights to see if we could kill the generator and make the elevator stop. But a still running respirator on the 5th floor scared the living crap out of me, and that was the last time I made any booty calls. Eventually the building got sold or whatever, and it's now been converted into an office block. When I was a teenager, I also lived in a very sketchy part of Ontario, California. My friend and I would skip class sometimes and find an out-of-the-way place to smoke and skate. And there was an empty house with an empty pool in the backyard that was our usual target. We never went to the house, I don't know why, but one day we got the bright idea to go inside one afternoon. But it looked like a drug den, only that there was some serious weird shit going on in there, like a cooking pot full of petrified ramen noodles that was stuck in a hole in the wall, big dents in the doors and floors, and handprints either made of blood or shit on the ceiling, and what looked to be pigeon feathers everywhere and glued to the walls. We found a new place to hang out after that. Just being in the backyard was way too close to the house. About 20 minutes from my house, there is a town with only one paved road, and then a couple of little dirt roads. If you follow the road all the way to the end, it leads to the cliffs with a lighthouse. There's a speed sign along the road with a tiny dot of black spray paint on it. If you walk directly into the bushes for about 300 meters, you find an old abandoned bomb shelter. My friend and I used to smoke there when we were younger. It's got a spiral staircase that leads down into one big room with 2 small rooms. It's full of graffiti now, and there's a little fireplace and super cool but really creepy stuff. Anyway, one night at about 1 a.m, my friend and I decided to go for a walk down there, as she lived in this town and her parents were asleep. So it was easy for us to sneak out, and we wanted an adventure. As we were walking into the bushes, I can see the bomb shelter in sight, and we can see a light flicking inside. So we freeze and just watch for a couple of minutes. Then we hear the sound of a group chanting. We want to get a closer look, so we creep a little closer, and as we were doing so, I stood on a branch and it snapped. Literally 1 second after, the lights went out and the chanting stopped. We sprinted the whole way home, and it freaks me out thinking about what could have happened, as we were 2 15-year-old girls at the time. I walked about 3 kilometers into a storm drain once. All of a sudden, we saw a pair of glowing eyes staring at us in the distance. Then, it made a noise, which was distorted by the acoustics of the drain, and made us shit our pants. It was like a horror movie. We were very deep into the drain, and it was pitch black. We had no idea what it was, nor why it was down there. Anyway, I decided to approach it with caution, and it happened to be a small little white fluff ball. A cat. It jumped and exited via a manhole. This manhole opened onto someone's driveway, directly opposite a local football match. A handful of people in the audience noticed us, 2 random teenagers popping out of a manhole with a soggy cat. The facial expressions of the police officers were priceless when we had to explain why we were taking a cat with us on public transport. I took the cat to an emergency vet and gave my contact details, as I offered to keep him if he had no owner. He wasn't microchipped or ever owned, but unfortunately he had kidney failure and thyroid disease, and they decided to put him down. I'm sad I didn't get to keep him, but he spent his last days in a warm shelter with food, water and care. If he'd stayed in that drain, it would have been a much sadder ending. So I'm happy that he got to leave this world peacefully. When I was 13, we went into abandoned old folks' home, climbed through a boarded window into a resident's bathroom, and through there into the tiny living quarters and out into the hall. Along the corridor, we were led to a dining hall with vaulted ceilings and a balcony from the second floor with a grand staircase that swelled up from one end of the room. All the first floor windows had been boarded up, but the second story ones remained uncovered. Stale light through years of dirt, net curtains and dank cobwebs lit the rooms up eerily. In the corner stood a white grand piano, broken keys and water damaged. Every round table covered in an old, crotched doily, with 6 chairs, some scattered on the floor. We stood in awe, whispering, "Wonder how many people died here." We tried another door, and at that point we must have set off an alarm. Like a warning siren, it split the air, amplified by the haunting dank air. The 6 of us bolted back to the corridor, down the residence room, and back out the window. We scrambled into the woods and around the abandoned gardens to the side of an old pond. We saw a security van coming round, and at age 13, with wild imaginations, it felt like the full police force was out to get us, and we decided on a plan. We'd split into 3 groups and meet back up at a swing park a mile up the road at 3, giving us 45 minutes to make an escape. As the other 2 groups scrambled off, one west, one east, the other kid and I sat down on an old bench. I was fat and not a fast runner, and we waited 20 minutes and a security van stopped close by. A guard came out asking us where we'd been, and I told him I was locked out of the house and my mum wouldn't be back till 4, so we were just waiting. This seemed to be enough of an answer for him, and he went on his way. We strolled off to the park and met up with the others. They ended up knocking down all those buildings and built a new hospital on the grounds behind Lambert, Scotland. Hey guys, it's Mort here, and thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed tonight's video. If of course you did, it would mean an awful lot if you would drop a like and leave a comment down below, as it goes a long way in helping me beat that pesky YouTube algorithm. Thanks guys. Now, if there is a story that you wish to share with me, feel free to send it to my Reddit or email it to me, and it should be able to make its way into a video. Assuming, of course, that you have paragraphed your story, included ample punctuation, and most importantly, added layers of detail to make the story flow better. But anyway, for now guys, I'm going to sign off. Stay awesome, and I'll see you in the next one.